Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week. How are you, my friend?
Very good, very good. This was very enjoyable prep. A little bit different from the previous week, so it's interesting because we listened to 3 albums and it was easier for me to digest than the one Emperor album. So that's something, I guess.
Well, we will talk all things Ad Infinitum as we do a career retrospective, our first of what I can only assume will be a number of Prog Power related episodes in the coming weeks and months. But before we get there, I just wanted to mention a few things. You mentioned Emperor, and I don't think we've recorded since I saw them last Sunday. So I just wanted to kind of memorialize that show in a number of ways. First of all, this was one of the most astounding shows I've ever seen for a multitude of reasons. They were not playing in Manhattan like most bands do. They actually played in Brooklyn at the King's Theater. And for those that have never been there, it is a really, in many ways, majestic and regal-looking theater in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn. A gorgeous venue that typically holds 3,000 people. And what they did was, and I'm kind of happy they did, they removed a number of seats from the floor so that the floor seats were kind of the back half of the floor section of the arena, and in front was general admission, which quite frankly I think they had to do for this show. If it was seated seats only, it would have just been like nuts. But they removed the seats and they crammed even more people in there. So this show had to have had close to 3,500 people at it. It was packed. And even though I was in the second row of seats, I was, maybe 20 rows from the stage when you factor in the sea of people. But I stood the whole time because just the way the seats are configured, you kind of had to stand to see over the sea of humanity that was in front of me. But God, what a show. I can't believe that they sounded this good when you factor in not only Isan singing, those vocals that he somehow can still pull off, here 27 years, 25 years later, what have you, but also that the barrage of drumming combined with the majestic keyboards in many ways, which is not really a word that I think most people would use to describe Emperor, but that's how they come across live. The mix was just so fantastic that I legitimately think that if you were at the show, you would have been like, this is really cool.
I think so too. I even, I mentioned this during our Patreon monthly, video chat that we had the other night. Even the cell phone videos that I saw, to me sounded better than the actual album. Not better, obviously not better, but
clearer.
Something about it just you could just tell. I guess we were just at a point where we've seen so many cell phone shot videos, and you can kind of tell when where it sounds really crisp. And I was impressed. I probably would have enjoyed it. I don't know if I would have paid the steep price it would have cost to see a show that I didn't have a massive interest in. But everyone I've talked to that was very pleased and had nothing but good things to say. So good. That was a good timely episode that you chose to do. So
selfish, if nothing else, but with that, a shout out to all the Patreons the Patreon fans that joined us for our monthly chat. We appreciate the support. It was awesome to catch up with so many of you from all around the world at odd hours, as it might have been for some. But we look forward to doing it again and invite everybody else who's either checking out the show for the first time or somebody that's been on the fence. Join our Patreon, join the community. I trust you will think it is worth it with the bonus episodes and the early releases, and if nothing else, the ad-free versions of the podcast. So come check us out.
We had people from such far and wondrous lands as Australia, as Denmark, and Tennessee.
Yeah. To say nothing of the New York contingent. So it was a good time, and I suspect there's going to be even more the next time. So it was definitely fun. So thanks again to everyone for their support. But in addition to Emperor, you actually sent me 2 tracks this week, both of which I found to be quite interesting, and coming from 2 different places. The first was the new Amaranth single called Damnation Flame, and apparently they released it in conjunction with the fact that they announced a new vocalist for the band. Apparently they have a new growling male vocalist. His name is Michael Sellon. I'm not familiar with any of his other work, but honestly, he kind of fit right in. I thought the single was pretty good, actually. And this is a band that admittedly has kind of lost me over time. I loved their debut album, which we covered in the archives it's got to be over 2 years ago now, I think.
I don't think we did. We talked about their newest album. I don't think we ever talked about their
You know what? I stand
oldest
corrected.
one.
We did. You're absolutely right. We talked about their newest album at the time. But to say no, I'm sure I mentioned it then. They've kind of lost me a little bit. Not that it's bad, but I like that first album so much, and it's kind of fallen off a little bit. But this sounded good. It sounded like there was new life in the band. The songwriting a bit more mature, I think, and I'm gonna give the album a fair listen when it comes out later this year.
Yeah, I think this is now their third. What do you want to call it? Their death vocalist, growling vocalist.
Yeah, sure, I like it.
Extreme vocalist. They're on their second clean male vocalist, their third harsh male vocalist, and still with their original Elise. Their original clean female vocalist, but they're always just hit or miss for me. I thought this was more on the hit end of things, so I'm looking forward to hearing this. There's definitely I got a little bit of Amaranth from Ad Infinitum this week, so we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to it.
I agree with you, but only in certain spots.
Yeah,
and I won't spoil it, but I would almost be willing to bet that we heard it on the same tracks because, well, I just think that it's that pronounced in many respects. But in addition to the Amaranth album, you sent me the first single, or the first, I guess we'll just call it the first single from Mark Hudson, who is the vocalist for Dragon Force. He announced his first solo album, which is due out August 25th. It's called Starbound Stories. And he released this single for, I think it was called Astra Live, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
I believe it is.
And this was a really pleasant surprise. I think he's a very good vocalist. And when I heard this song, it actually made me think of a friend of mine, not because of the song itself, but a friend of mine hates solo albums. And when the band or the artist tries to do a solo album that's in a completely different vein, he will inevitably say, stick to what works, don't deviate from the formula. But when they release a solo album that's just like their other material, his response is, why don't they ever expand their horizons? So you can't please this guy. But I find it funny because this was definitely in the latter camp. This is Dragon Force 2.0, everything from the vocals all the way down to the music. But what was interesting to me is that the lineup here is fascinating in a number of ways. First of all, the keyboard player is a guy I've never heard of by the name of Shaz D. But the guitar player is Frederick Leclerc, who's currently in Creator, although this sounds nothing like Creator. And the bass player, or sorry, I should say the drummer, is Rich Smith, formerly of
Power Quest, yes.
So when you mix Dragon Force and Power Quest, which is a formula that's been going back now for over 20 years, you can kind of guess what this is going to sound like. And it was quite good. I enjoyed it a lot. I have to assume you did as well.
Had no idea that this was even a thing. It was actually Rich who posted the video. I noticed it on one of his social media things, and so I checked it out and I looked it up, and sure enough, he's the drummer, so that would probably explain why he was sharing it. But it's quite good. It actually gave me a bit of more of a early Dragon Force vibe, if anything else, which is odd because Mark wasn't even their singer at the time. But Just good stuff. Rich has always had a connection with Dragon Force. He was in a IMI with former Dragon Force vocalist ZP Thart. Never knew how to say that. So
Still don't know how to say it.
ZP, if you're listening, I apologize. So it was cool to see him on here. He's a really talented drummer and a really nice guy. So cool to see.
And
I also was not familiar with Shaz Z. So
that makes two of us. But somebody you are familiar with, and Metal Exchange alum Adrian Cowan does a guest spot on this. So that'll be cool to hear as well. I wasn't sure if you knew that.
Yeah, I did see that in the press release, so that's exciting. A couple of Japanese artists too, so I'm wondering if there's going to be a little bit of a Eastern flair to this. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of it, but this was like you said, a very very pleasant surprise. Speaking of which, I listened to an album this week that you had recommended that I ended up really enjoying more than I think I would have thought, and I think even more than you thought, but I'm sure you mentioned it when you first heard it, but I'll repeat it. It's a melodic doom metal album by a band called Fires in the Distance. The album was called Air Not Meant for Us. I enjoyed the hell out of this. Like, even I listened to that first 10, almost 11-minute track, and I was hooked, like, right off the bat. I like this a lot. It's something I'm probably going to go back to. I don't know if it makes the list at the end of the year, but it may. I like this a lot, and that was a really pleasant surprise. I feel like the first quarter of the year like really started out strong for me, and then I've been kind of struggling with finding stuff that really grabbed me in the second quarter, although one of those albums we'll be talking about in full shortly. But yeah, this was great, and I thank you for the recommendation, and I'm glad that you thought that I might enjoy it, because I absolutely did.
I was floored by this album. I really enjoyed it. It is, without giving too much away, I have this running list. It is squarely in the top 50 at this point, of which the list is not complete, but I don't see it getting bumped just because there's 6 months left in the year, and I just don't see how many albums could possibly push this that far down the list. I think for me, the only question is how far or where it winds up, if you will. This was just a perfect blend of that doom sound that you'd hear with a Candlemass or something like that, but with enough going on with the keyboards that I said to myself, you know what? There's a real chance that you could really grow to like this thing. So I just thought of you as keeping an open mind, and as we've checked out some more extreme metal stuff over the years. Not that doom metal is that extreme, but between the doom and the black and the the thrash, I said I think there's a chance for this one because of the keyboards, and I'm glad I was right.
Yeah, the orchestrations I think really put it over the top, and not so much keyboards as much as it is like actual piano, or it could just be really good keyboard tracks that sound like a piano, but it sounds like you're listening to a legit piano, and it's just really, really beautiful orchestrations. The vocals were not terribly offensive to me. They are pretty much like what you'd expect from a growly kind of doom metal album, but it didn't take away from the experience. So if that's kind of your thing, I think you should check it out. And even if it's not, it's definitely not my thing, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. So
and they're from Connecticut, so I have to think that they're going to play. They've been announcing shows for quite a while, actually. I know that they're playing Albany next month. They're playing all around Massachusetts and Maine. I haven't seen a New York City date. I haven't seen an upstate New York date up near you, but I have to think it's coming. So I look forward to catching them live sooner rather than later.
It's very refreshing to see some of these like really good U.S. bands start to poke their head out.
Yeah, like
I feel like we kind of had like a dry spell, and now we have bands like Seven Spires and Seven Kingdoms and a lot of Seven bands. But this band Will to Run. There's just a lot of good bands coming out of the U.S., which is nice to see.
And like I said, I mentioned in passing a couple of weeks ago that there was an album that completely and utterly blew me away. that I can't really get into details at this point, but I will in due time. But
it was Angus McSix, wasn't it?
It was Angus McSix. You are absolutely right. No, but this other band happens to be an American band as well, and their future is beyond bright. So it's to your point, lots of very good American bands that are popping up in all sorts of genres, everything from prog to thrash to to melodic doom. So you're covering all the bases here, which is awesome. Did you have a chance to hear anything else, or basically focusing on Ad Infinitum?
Yeah, I mean that was I probably listened to some other stuff, but that cool. I really wanted to point that one out.
Cool.
I was gonna say maybe I'll wait till next week, but I mean we're gonna have some real heavy episodes the next few weeks. I think maybe towards the end of the episode, if you think it's appropriate, we can kind of let the cat out of the bag of what's going on for the next few weeks, or pretty much how the rest of July is going to shake out. But for the most part, I did listen to mostly Ad Infinitum. There was a few new singles that came out that I really have not had a chance to listen to yet, but I'm looking forward to hearing. And you had recommended this Enter Polaris double album that I plan on checking that out.
I think you're only going to like one of them, though. I think that as I dove deep into that second disc, it's a little too. I liked it. I want to be clear. I liked it. I don't think you will like it. I think it's going to be on the drier side of prog rock, whereas the first album is straight up power metal, which is awesome, by the way. So a really interesting release. And then I guess they have two more albums coming out that are in different genres from those two. So I don't know if it's a death metal thing or whatever, but definitely talented songwriters that they can kind of touch upon all these different genres in releases in short succession too. They're all coming out, I think, this year and next. So pretty interesting stuff.
And the other thing that that dropped today was there's a new single from I guess they're now going by The Cryptex, not just Cryptex. I don't know if there was some sort of other band or other entity that was known as Cryptex, but it looks like on the new cover art for their new album, which was going to be called Nimbus, they're now called The Cryptex. They will be opening the day 3 of Prog Power this year. Their album's coming out at the end of September, and they released the second single, Fall Down. I didn't even know they released the first single, so I grabbed the first single today. I haven't had a chance to listen to that. That song is called Cobra. So they have two singles. I believe they will maybe be selling an advanced copy of the album at Prog Power. That would be kind of cool. But this is a band I really need to listen to more of leading into the festival, because I feel like I'm going to really enjoy them.
I think that's fair, and I did hear that they were releasing the album, I think, about a month early at the festival, or at the very least a couple of weeks. So that'll be something to definitely check out. And I agree with you. I think that we should announce the schedule for the rest of the month, which we normally don't do. But to be fair, because of the amount of prep that was involved in this, we couldn't just leave it to the week before for some of these upcoming weeks or upcoming episodes. So we'll kind of let the cat out of the bag, and then we'll leave the surprise for our August request. But with that all being said, Ad Infinitum, a career retrospective, and it comes in as a request from one of our patrons and one of our friends, Amy, who I think had some words to say about it. So why don't we lead with her thoughts, and then we'll kind of get into the band and the 3 albums and go, kind of deep into it.
Yeah, so Amy had a short but sweet comment, and she just said, I love the first album in the trilogy, and then each one just got better. I'm thrilled to be able to see them live in September, and can't wait to hear the discussion between Justin and Chris on all 3 albums. So thank you, Amy. Thank you for your patronage and your friendship. And we are looking forward to talking about this still pretty up-and-coming band, I would say. I mean, this is got to be our first career retrospective of a band that hasn't been around for very long.
Yeah, so this is a band that within a very short 3 years or 4 years has literally put out 3 albums and an acoustic version of one of those albums. So they are releasing material fast and furiously. And I guess it really all started back in 2018, and it was kind of the brainchild in many ways of their singer, Melissa Bonney. What happened was she was, doing her thing in her other band called Rage of Light, who I think they're now defunct. And then all of a sudden she releases a single back in November of 2018 called I Am the Storm from their debut album. And it was recorded with Timo Somers from Delane, who we've talked about at various points on the show. And they crowdfunded an album, which was apparently an overwhelming success. And with that, they were able to release their debut in 2020 called Chapter 1 Monarchy. And I remember when this album came out, I remember when the single came out, and I was just floored by this new voice on the scene and this melodic, catchy symphonic metal that, I appreciate when it's done well. And they would release a acoustic album later that year called Chapter 1 Revisited, and it was basically the same album but all acoustic. And the next year they came out with Chapter 2 Legacy, which was a real favorite of mine. That album, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was in the either top 7 or 8 of the year that it came out, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I'm going to check right now. It was number 8 for my album of the year, and I think it was number 5 for you, going back to my notes. So that was an album we both adored. And then ultimately they came out with Chapter 3 Downfall this year. I have to think it's the end of the trilogy, and they'll go into something a little different on the next album, to be determined. But yeah, in a nutshell, you're talking about 3 full-length releases in a matter of 4 years, which is pretty remarkable in this day where it seems like a lot of bands are taking 4 years to release one album, if not more.
Absolutely, yeah. It's I don't know why, but I felt like the debut album had a lot of hype for a band that didn't actually exist. It reminded me a bit of when Amaranth's first album came out, and like everybody was talking about it, and it's like, well, this band doesn't exist yet, so like where are we, why are we so excited about it? But I think it was very much deserved after listening to it. Yeah, so Melissa's from Switzerland, lives in Denmark with her boyfriend, who happens to be the drummer from Amaranth, Martin Sorensen, who I think is still in Amaranth. It's kind of hard to keep track, as we mentioned earlier. But
have you verified this information, or is this off the cuff, or did they check in with you?
I'm looking into it. I'm going to probably ask her in person at Prague Power right before the restraining order gets slapped on me. But
I know a guy. Don't. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's interesting because you hear a lot of stories about how a bunch of guys start a band and they get a female vocalist and she might not have a lot of like creative input in the beginning of the band, and eventually she does as time goes on. But in this case, it's like she was like at the forefront of getting this band started, writing music, writing lyrics, which is really amazing. Not even to speak of the fact that she's an incredibly talented vocalist in 2 completely different styles of vocals, which we haven't really got into, but she can do some really frightening growls, and she also has a very, very beautiful, clean vocal. So just a very, very talented lady, and you get a lot of both of them. I mean, it's more clean than growly, but there's definitely plenty of growls to kind of give it a little bit more of an edge, I feel.
And now I think you're starting to really see the fruits of that labor, because she's toured with Camelot, coming out on songs like I have to think like that song from the Black Halo, where I think it used to be with Simone Simmons from Epica. So it's kind of like and other songs on the new album as well. She's kind of their resident vocalist at this point, to say nothing of just a million guest appearances on other albums. I mean, I count too many to name, and other projects that she's working on, like Dark Side of the Moon, which you referenced last week, and other projects as well. I think she was with Führenschwanz at Prague Power at 70,000 Tons. So she's been kind of everywhere. And I mentioned her earlier in a completely different context, but I think in many ways that her and Adrian Cowan are the 2 preeminent younger symphonic metal vocalists, both of whom do the dual style, mind you. But they are leading the charge in a number of ways, because not only are they everywhere, but whatever they're on seems to kind of hit, and they are both phenomenal songwriters and wonderful vocalists to boot.
The Midas touch they both have.
Exactly. Well said. And so, it's funny, we're as you mentioned, it's a career retrospective on a band who's been around for a hot second. But like I said, I remember when that debut album Monarchy came out, and I was just really, really impressed by that album. I said to myself, if this is any indication of what this band is going to be, we're in for a real treat, simply put. And there was so much to like. I don't want to say that there was anything brand new that was kind of on the album. It was nothing that you had never heard before, but it was done really well. And this was another album that was in my top 50 the year it came out in 2020. It didn't crack the top 10. It was, I think, somewhere in the 30s or early 40s, but it was an album that left an impression on me because I really liked it a lot. And what I can say is this. Going into this week, I had preconceived notions about this band, and I knew all of these albums fairly well, but I thought certain things. And after kind of diving deep back into this stuff, my impressions changed completely about certain things about the band and the albums. And then I said, this just doesn't make sense to me because it's not the way I remembered it so clearly, and we're not going back very far. So I did another listen today. I listened to all three of their albums today in preparation for this recording. And I think I'm back in line with what I originally thought. I just needed a little bit of a break because I think I was having a temporary lapse of judgment or sanity on certain things. And I'll kind of walk you through what those things were because they're interesting. But I'm grounded now. I have my thoughts on this band, and I think that I think that they have a very bright future, with a caveat, but I'll get to that at the end.
Yeah, well said. I kind of went on my own journey with this, with these albums as well. But it's interesting to to say that the band's going to have a bright future, because I agree. But I mean, they've already, like you said, they put out 3 albums and an acoustic album, and
are very playing festivals all over the world.
Yeah, they're very accomplished for a new band. I mean, they've been a straight up band for only 3 years. Like you said before, Melissa kind of wrote that, released that I Am the Storm song as a single in 2018. But, I mean, only one member change. The original bassist, Jonas Asplund, plays bass on the first album. He had to leave the band due to an injury, I believe. And, he was replaced by, I believe it's Corbinian Benedict. What an epic name, by the way. And then the other founding members are guitarist Adrian Thessenwitz and drummer Nicholas Mueller. So that kind of pretty much it's a way easier personnel rundown than going through like Halloween or
when you tried to do the Power Quest lineup, which was like you were getting guys that were in and out of the band in between albums. It was
second only to Yngwie when it comes to band member changes. But so yeah, that one was pretty easy. I think I pronounced everyone's name correctly. So that's pretty much all there is as far as maneuverings as far as personnel goes. But tell me what your preconceived thoughts were on the first album and how they may or may not have changed upon revisiting it.
I remember, as I said, it was a top 50 disc. The album went the year that it came out. It was an album that I remembered being very, very simple and straightforward. The maturity hadn't been there yet, but it was catchy as hell, and in many ways laying the foundation for what I expected to be some better music going forward, even though I like this. This is a very good album, and when I listened to it, it was actually in many ways better than I remembered it. The only thing I would say is for a self-produced debut album, sounds great, but you could tell that by the second album, and definitely the third album, but even by the second album, the production budget was markedly higher. Just because even though the first album sounds great, and it just doesn't have that same level of orchestration that you'd hear on the second album, but the songs are really catchy. And I think that if this was like something sent to me as a demo or as a promo, I would have been telling everybody I knew about this band, just because I think the foundation was laid pretty clearly on Monarchy.
That's really well said. I felt, I also listened to all three albums again, the first two last night and the third one right before we started recording, and I felt as if the first album was the most symphonic, or the most orchestral, I really should say. I feel like there was more orchestrations, very like Camelot-esque, just those very sweeping. I felt like that wasn't as prominent on the following albums. I didn't remember I ranked this album so high the year it came out, and as I've re-listened to it, I can see why. It's really just one banger after another. Kicking off with Infected Monarchy, which I think is like a very like Camelot-esque intro, where it kind of has like a mid-tempo kind of march to it. It actually reminds me a little bit of Stream of Passion in some ways. I get a lot of different flavors of different bands as I listen to this band, and I'll mention them as I come on. But I think this was a really solid opening track.
I agree, and I also agree with you. I hear Camelot through and through. Now that you mention Stream of Passion, I can kind of hear it, but to me, this is a Camelot-inspired track. And as soon as those church bells kick in and you have that very symphonic intro, you know what this band is. They're melodic, not overly technical, not overly quick, or the delivery isn't that of a Dragon Force or something like that. But it's you can tell this is going to be very anthemic and chorus driven, and that's what this track is. And I like it, but my issue with the band, and I think that I'm going to say it once to try not to repeat myself, is that as great as the tracks are, and as much as I enjoy every album, there's a bit of a sameness quality to the cadence on a lot of these tracks. And so it's great in the moment, but if I was to go back and say which track is markedly better than the other, especially on this album, difficult to do. And I'll give you a perfect example. Marching on Versailles, another mid-pace track, and it basically is a different melody, but it has the same overall feel and cadence, in my opinion, to that of the first track. Very movie soundtrack-esque, and a very simple but like whimsical chorus to it. But I like it. It's repetitive but enjoyable. But again, is it that much better or worse than the first track? No, I'd say it's about the same.
I like this song a lot more than the first track.
Do
actually.
you?
It's actually my favorite song on the album, and it's my favorite Ad Infinitum song, period.
Really? Okay.
I find it constantly creeping back into my head. It's got like all that great. This one, Epica and Camelot are fairly similar in ways. This is kind of more of an Epica-esque kind of tune, but I just really like, it's so powerful, even though it is kind of that same tempo. There's not really a ton of like speedy songs that this band does, which is usually my kind of, area. Oh my God, I just love the orchestrations are just so earwormy. I love this song. I really do. And it's the song I always end up getting stuck in my head. I end up going back to it. Unfortunately it's coming incredibly early in our retrospective, but this is going to be my song of the week, and definitely my favorite song on chapter 1, Monarchy. So why don't we give it a listen, and we'll come back.
This was your final chance, a chance you didn't take. Like the lightning we will
So we get to Maleficent, which is a heavier tune, a darker tune, maybe a drop faster. I don't know. But this song is really led by like the drums and the bass with a very melodic chorus. And I got to be honest, it's kind of gimmicky, but I love when the music cuts out and then all of a sudden the vocals kick in right before the instrumental section. It's like one of those cheesy gimmicks that bands do, but they do it well. And I think the growls here are fantastic, and it really, much like on the prior track, I think they lend a really nice. They add just enough of a flavor to it that it doesn't stay boring, and it's a really enjoyable track.
Yeah, agreed. There's certain parts where Melissa sings that reminds me a lot of Charlotte Wessels, formerly of Delane, and that I get a little bit of that on this track, and then she starts letting out growls, and then you're like, nah, Charlotte wouldn't do that. So
definitely can see the differences between the two of them. But I do hear Delane here in spots as well, this being one of them.
Yeah, solid tune.
And then we go to See You in Hell, which is, I'll be honest, not my song of the week, but a song that just gets stuck in your head. It's been stuck in my head since I heard it at 7:30 this morning on my way to work. And any song that starts with Melissa Bonney and a harp, you got me hooked. I'm hooked. And I love the layered vocals on this thing. You think it's going to be a ballad, and then all of a sudden this riff kicks in, and it just kind of kicks your butt. The violin and the harp kind of set this thing apart, and it's one of my favorite tracks on the album.
The idea of commuting into New York City to a song called See You in Hell really makes sense to me.
Yeah. No argument here.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite songs on this album, and one of my favorite Ad Infinitum songs. Just again, like much like Marching on Versailles, it's just got a very powerful orchestral kind of marching tempo to it, and I really like this song a lot.
What do you think of I Am the Storm, which again was kind of like the song that kicked things off for the band?
Yeah, this one is more of that up tempo, speedier kind of song. The sweeping orchestrations are very Camelot-esque in my opinion. This is another really, I mean, this album is just like one really good song after another. I like this album a lot. And I really like this song as well. I think this is an excellent tune. How about you?
And it stands out from the mid-pace stuff before it, and I think that's part of the reason this really resonates with me. It's not my song of the week, but it easily would be my song of the week if we did this as a standalone album. I like the song that much. This is less symphonic metal and more straight up power metal, but they do it really well. And the orchestration during the chorus pops like crazy, and then there's this crazy aggressive bridge with the growls, which just really is the perfect bridge, no pun intended, to this like fairy tale like ballad section of the song. Just well constructed, and you can definitely hear the Delane influence on this one, but I like it a lot.
Yeah, definitely well said. I think people probably would have assumed that would have been my favorite song on the album.
I would have.
It's probably a pretty close number 2. Fire and Ice is another one where it kind of goes back to that mid tempo vibe. It's a little bit more moody, a little bit more it has a ballady kind of quality to it. Yeah. Although I wouldn't call it a straight up ballad, but another really good tune. This was one of how many? There was five singles from this album, and this was a fifth of the 5. I Am the Storm being the first, and then they did singles for Marching on Versailles, See You in Hell, and then Live Before You Die, which is the next track. But before we talk about that, your thoughts on Fire and Ice?
I don't love it. I think it's one of my 2 least favorite songs on the album. And that doesn't mean I don't like the album. I want to be clear. The album's great. And there's a reason why I had it ranked as highly as I did. And even revisiting it, I'm like, this is a really solid album. It's mixed exceptionally well. And there's a nice crunch in the chorus, which I really enjoy. I just find it to be somewhat underwhelming and weaker by comparison to the other stuff. So again, not like a song you'd skip, but just something missing. Whereas the next track, Live Before You Die, is a song that really just doesn't waste any time. There's no ballad-like quality to this one. It's just a solid riff and some really upbeat drums. Like, when I say upbeat, I mean just like the drum fills and the drum patterns are really kind of upbeat and positive in many ways, much like the lyrical content that kind of accompanies it. Nothing you haven't heard before, I want to be clear, but it's just really well done. You move your head to the beat, and I love, again, another wonderful bridge that leads to like this big chorus where the vocals go up an octave, which is, again, another gimmick, but call me a sucker for gimmicks. I think it's done well here. I have a feeling you like this one as well.
Yeah, definitely. Another heavy hitter, in my opinion. Again, this is another single that they released, but I don't have anything to add that you didn't just say. I thought that was perfectly said. Great tune.
So we get to Revenge, which has this like hauntingly beautiful intro that reminds me so much of Nightwish. And not only Nightwish, but like this quirky Scaretale vibe to it. But just different pacing. But just the vibe of the song reminds me of Scaretale by Nightwish. A little proggy, probably their most well-composed tune, I think, on the album. And it drives me nuts because every time I hear this, I hear it, when I listen to the pre-chorus, it reminds me of something and I cannot put my finger on it. And I've listened to it probably 10 times this week, going back to it, hoping it was going to jog my memory. But unfortunately, it didn't. But I do like the cadence, the progginess of the cadence through this thing. I just wish I could tell you what it reminded me of.
It reminded me of Delane a lot.
Okay.
Maybe even a little bit of Within Temptation, but I really like that part where she's singing "I Believe." Like it sounds like Charlotte a lot in a lot of ways, but this is the song that really reminded me, I think, the most of Delane of any of the tracks on this album. But again, another song I like quite a bit, and you're right, it does have kind of a creepy, kind of Scaretale-ish beginning.
And then we get to the last two tracks, Demons and Tell Me Why. Starting with Demons, any thoughts about this one, or as we get towards the back end of the album?
This one's a little bit on the faster side than some of the previous tracks, although I don't know that I like it as much as most of the rest of the album. It's a solid tune, but probably towards the bottom of my favorite tracks on this album, although that's not really a knock because I really, really like this album. But it's a little bit weaker than the rest for me.
It gives me a strong Delane vibe on this one. This one, to me, is the one that screams Delane, although I think I like this song more than you do. I actually think it's arguably the perfect penultimate track. It is upbeat, certainly, which you kind of need as you get to the back end of an album, but it's not so cheesy that it takes you out of the moment. And I think the growls during the chorus are just fantastic. So I actually like this song a lot. It's one of my, I don't know, it's probably in the top half of songs on the album for me. And then it ends with this song that Tell Me Why, where I remember the first time I heard it, I thought it was going to be a true ballad, but it's really more of a power ballad. This is the other song on the album that just doesn't click for me. This is a snoozer for me. I think it's fine. It's just not as catchy as the others, and it left me wanting more. And fortunately, more was to come very, very soon, a year later. But something about this is a little droning to me, and I don't quite know why. And it takes it away. Again, not bad. It's just not my favorite by any stretch.
Yeah, it's I like it a little bit more than the previous track, but again, like there's so many heavy hitters, kind of really from like track 1 through 8, 7, 7 or 8. I don't know, man. Yeah, it's a very epic, and orchestral symphonic kind of tune, and again, like it just made me think about in general. I feel like this was their most symphonic and orchestral album. I feel like the later albums, there's a bit more of an electronic vibe and less of that kind of classic, like, symphony orchestra kind of sound, which is neither, good nor bad, just a little bit different. But I think that is what kind of made that first album stand out to me, was just kind of that, Camelot, Epica, Nightwish, just that symphonic power metal vibe that I think they just did really, really well.
So to that point, I definitely agree that there's a much more of an electronic vibe, especially in spots on that third album, the one that came out earlier this year. I don't hear it as much on Chapter 2, but to that end, I am happy that they started dabbling in these other areas, and it certainly doesn't overpower the album, but we'll get to that in a minute. This first disc is only about 43 minutes long, so you're in, you're out, you get a taste of the band, but you kind of find yourself wanting to go back to the beginning and listening to it again. I'm curious, though, to see how it ranks in comparison to the other two albums. What are you rating this on a scale of 1 to 10 for this debut, Monarchy?
I give it a 9. I think it's just
wow.
I just think it's a really excellent album, and I going back to it just kind of reminded me how much, especially those handful of songs, almost the entirety of the first 8 tracks are just songs I absolutely love. So it's a really high score for me, and I just love it. It was a pleasure to go back and listen to it again. I kind of forgot what it sounded like on a whole. Like I had gone back to certain tracks here and there, but I hadn't gone back and listened to the album start to finish in a long time, and so it was just really good. I mean, it's as good as a band could hope for a debut album.
I can't give it a 9, although I liked it a lot. It was a 7.75 for me, which for a debut album is a fantastic score. A shade below your Sonata Arctica Eclipticas and your Angora Angels Cry, but a very, very good score for a debut. What's interesting, though, is when I went back and I listened to Chapter 2 Legacy, in my head, this was going to be the far and away best album that I think that they had ever done to this early, point in their career. However, when I went back and listened to it, I don't know if it was the day I was having or what was going on, but I was like, man, this is kind of overrated by my standards. I don't know why I put it in my top 10 for the year that I listened to it. Not that I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was good, but it didn't really, I don't know. I thought something was missing. And then I said to myself, something is amiss here. I got to go back and I got to, kind of give this some more listens. So I listened to it again this morning, as I mentioned, and I'm like, it must have been the mood or the day. And that's why I always give these albums multiple listens when we record. This, to me, is their definitive work. Not that the new album is bad. Like I said, it's going to be in my top 50 when it's all said and done, but this album is absolutely fantastic. It takes the debut, it adds better production, a little more pizzazz and flavor to it, but a maturity in the songwriting, which, although it's in the same style, I think takes things to a whole nother level. And I could see, especially today, why I like this album as much as I did 2 years ago when I first heard it.
Interesting. Yeah. I know I really liked it when it came out because I ranked it really high, and in a vacuum, I think it's a really good album. It's just that every time I listen to it right after the first album, which I just don't think I don't think it's as good as the first album.
Interesting.
I just think it might be more balanced, but I don't think that it doesn't have as many heavy hitters. And I think that's kind of where I find the album to be a slightly less than the first, personally.
Well, let's get into it, shall we? It starts with a song called Reinvented, and for my money, it's just an absolute perfect opener. It's short, it's catchy, but yet it certainly retains that core sound of the band. It's a little repetitive, but it's so short that it almost doesn't feel like it's overdone. And then it's just this big chorus with this heavy orchestration on top. And then, of course, as they've done on the first album, the band eventually comes back after the instrumental section and they go up an octave. Again, gimmicky, but they're painting the right numbers here. I think it's a very good opening track. It's not my favorite on the album, but it's a good opener.
Yeah, I think it also kind of fits what they did on the first album. I feel like it kind of would have fit in on that album. I don't think anybody would have questioned it. It does have those does have that, those orchestrations and stuff that I was saying were on the first one, and Yeah, solid tune. I like this one.
And then
Again, the band released a ton of singles. They released singles for Unstoppable, Afterlife, Animals, and Inferno. So, did you happen to listen to the acoustic version of the first album, or?
due to lack of time, I didn't. I think it's really going to be more of a pleasure project for me after we record to go back to it. But I know it well enough, and it's actually really good. I didn't mention it because it's kind of, I'm not going to start talking about all the same tracks again. But if you like acoustic material, you could find a lot worse than that album. I was kind of hoping they did it for all three of the albums, but seemed like it was a one and done.
Yeah, well said. I definitely think it's worth checking out. It's really good. Their music really lends well to an acoustic setting. Anyway, getting back to chapter 2, what did you think of Unstoppable?
So I vividly remember this coming out as a single. I know it's one of the 4 or so on the album. It has a similar cadence, I think, to the prior track, but the drums of all things really stand out here. I think some of the drum fills are really nice little things throughout that kind of keep this moving. What I found is that the instrumental section was actually just a bit more robust than the prior track, with a fantastic guitar solo. And I haven't mentioned that since we started with talking about the band, but the guitar solo on this one, really, really good. And you can almost feel the emotion in the solo. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album, and I think it's a worthy single.
Yeah, it's a really good tune. I think Melissa's vocals of all kinds are really excellent here. You hear those really high oohs that kind of gave me a little bit of, again, a Charlotte vibe, and then it goes just right into the growls. Like, it just really just impressive. I'm looking forward to seeing how she balances these types of vocals in a live setting, going back and forth.
Spoiler, seamlessly.
Oh, well, there you go.
But I'll let you
even a band as seasoned as Scarcinometry needs to have separate singers to handle their growls and their cleans separately, and so Melissa's got a leg up on them. But I thought this was one of those songs that's just a really good example of how well she does both of those both styles.
Nice. I like it. As we kind of march through the rest of this album, talk to me about Inferno, because this one's a bit of a slow starter, almost like a ballad, but it becomes upbeat pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's another one of those really, like, it's what's becoming the classic Ad Infinitum, like, mid-tempo, marchy kind of tune, very epic. I don't think that it quite lives up to some of the, like, the marching on Versailles of the world from that first album. I don't know. That song is just, like, untouchable for me, for whatever reason. But it is definitely a solid song. And like, again, like, every song on this album is really good. It's just, for me, it just lacks, like, some of those home run tracks that were on that first album, even though probably the worst songs on the first album are worse than the worst songs on this album, if that makes sense.
It does. I think it definitely is more balanced. This is actually one of my least favorite tracks on the album, and yet I still like it more than certain songs on the debut. So that's kind of what I think about this track. It reminds me in many ways of Visions of Atlantis, who's another band I look forward to seeing. So that'll be a lot of fun. But it's just, to me, the song itself is not very memorable. What I think when I hear this song, I just think of it almost as a Melissa Bonney solo song, because she just shines on this thing over mediocre music, I guess. Whereas the next song is a lot more enjoyable to me. It's repetitive as well. It's called Your Enemy. Here, it's the low end. It's the bass and the drums that really kind of drive this thing. It has a bit of a Lacuna Coil vibe, which I thought was kind of cool. It's gothic, it's dark, but it's got a catchy chorus that hooks you, again, with the dual vocals throughout, which is kind of nice. I like this song more than Inferno.
Yeah, this one gave me Amaranth vibes, kind of like more of the, like, mid-tempo, less techno-y, less, like, synthy kind of Amaranth type song. Yeah, solid. Another very good song. I'm going to leave the details to you, I think, on a lot of these tracks, because you have an eloquence about you that I'm not quite able to verbalize.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
So keep up the verbosity.
I will do my best. Let's talk Afterlife. This is the first guest appearance I think that we have on one of their tracks, and it's none other than Nils Malin from the aforementioned Amaranth and Dynasty. What's interesting to me is I don't think I ever appreciated this track as much as I did this morning when I heard it. For some reason, I always kind of knew it was there and knew it as a tune that I liked. This song's awesome, man. It has this beauty and a beast quality to it that is very enjoyable, a very powerful blend of vocals, and a really good chorus. It's actually, I think, one of the better power ballads that you'll hear. And I like how Nils actually sings the second verse. He'll do leads on the actual verse itself. And I think that at the end of the track, Melissa Bonney's really pushing her vocals, which is something that I don't know that had done to this point in the discography. I like this track a lot. It just took me a while to get there. I
think it's funny that you used the Beauty and the Beast kind of way to describe it, because typically Melissa's doing both.
Yeah.
So now it's like, this song was the song I remembered most from this album, and I think just because Nils was on it, it gave it a bit of a different flavor than the previous songs. And I reserve the right to change my mind by the end of this discussion, but I do think this is my favorite song on this album, and I think that their duet is just really well done. The fact that the chorus is sung by both of them simultaneously, I think just it's almost like kind of like hearing two great singers from two great bands come together to do a track together. I just really like this song. It's a really powerful and catchy song. I agree with everything that you had to say.
What do you think of Breathe, which is the next track?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember it. Oh, okay, yeah. So this one also kind of has a ballady quality to it. I would say it's even more ballady than the previous track. Very emotion. It's a very emotional track, I feel. The guitar solo feels emotional. Like, it's just a very I don't know. Would you say? I feel like this might be like their most power ballad song we've talked about so far.
It could be. This is a little bit of a weird track for me. It's a track that I'd like to hear live. I think it's a little bit underwhelming on the disc. The way it starts out with the keyboards reminds me of something you would have heard from Skylark back in 1998, going back 25 years, which is not necessarily a compliment, even though they were a very keyboard-laden band. It was a little bit cheesy, I guess, just the way that it's presented. But for some reason, even though
I'm sure Falco Orlandini appreciates the mention.
And to the 12 people that are listening that know who that is, congrats to you. But what I like about the track is it is melodic and it's powerful, and it certainly is more in the power ballad vein. The bass lines actually stand out here. It's the first time I can say that I really noticed bass lines on some of their stuff. But again, I'd like to hear it in a live setting, although I doubt they play it.
Yeah, I have no idea what to expect as far as what they're going to play, and I think I'm going to go into the set blind and just be surprised. Yep. But I don't think either one of us have really mentioned it in particular so far, but Adrian's guitar playing is really, really solid. Like, throughout the album, I think the guitar solos are really good, and I think they should be pointed out, because I feel like sometimes this can seem like it's a one-person show because Melissa is just such a force. Not to mention that she's quite pleasant to look at as well. But Adrian's guitar work is phenomenal, and just listen to any of the guitar solos on this album, and you'll hear this is a very accomplished guitar player.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Underrated, I guess, in many regards, because he's never talked about, but he does a really nice job on some of this stuff. And that kind of concludes the first half of the album, and the single or another single for the song Animals is kind of kicks off the second half of the album. And this is the song that I remember grabbing me the first time that I listened to the album, because it really, in many ways, sounds a bit like an outlier. It's a little bit different than some of the other tracks. That being said, the chorus has an April Rain vibe, and I love that album, as we've talked about in the archives. So I think that that's part of the allure for me. And these groovy bass lines that kind of, I don't want to say stand out, but they help drive the track. Really, really good stuff. I am hoping they play this song live and I have a feeling they will. I love this track. Easily a Song of the Week contender on this album, no doubt about it. But not my Song of the Week.
Yeah, big fan of this. Maybe my favorite chorus of any Ad Infinitum song. I just, I think it just is such a catchy earworm type of chorus. Just really grabs you every time. And yeah, definitely picking up some of these Delane vibes. It's kind of funny that these bands that we're comparing them to are all going to be playing at Prague Power, Camelot, Delane,
Visions of Atlantis.
Yeah, Visions of Atlantis. That's a rant and rave for another day because I am so excited about the lineup this year. Got
which
plenty
we
of time
will
to talk
get
about
to,
that.
which we will certainly get to.
But yeah, this is a good one. I'd love to hear this one live as well.
Much like their first track ever, I think Into the Night is another real power metal tune. Seems like they sprinkle these songs in there, but it helps with the pacing and the just the makes the listening experience, I think, a little more pleasing. And I like how the growls actually kick this song off. It's a bit different. But at the same time, the album needed a banger, and I think this is definitely it. I definitely hear a Seven Spires vibe on this track, and I don't know if that was intentional. I'm inclined to think it wasn't, but this is a really good tune, and I think it actually should have been towards the front of the disc because it almost gets buried in the middle, but this is a really short but sweet tune.
Yeah, I kind of like that, like, these really faster tunes from them are actually the exception to the rule, because they really seem to their comfort zone really seems to be that mid-tempo marching kind of. I mean, literally, one of the songs has the word marching in it. But yeah, this is another one of those good, like, really faster tracks. I'm trying to put my finger on like what it reminds me of something. I'm not going to think of it right now, but yeah, really just solid, fast-paced tune. And like you said, it is. I think it helps. This album feels like it has more variations as far as tempos and styles go than the first one did.
And I think that is part of the allure for me, just because I crave that nowadays. And I think that's actually on full display with Son of Wallachia, which is the next track. A lot of heavy orchestration on this one, almost like a movie score. And I like how it's a little slower, it's more deliberate, but at the end of the day, I think that I like the fact that it has that movie score vibe to it. It's not my favorite track or anything like that, but I think the clean vocals are just phenomenal, and I think that that's one of the highlights of this particular song, just the way that the vocals shine through.
Yeah, well said. I think, yeah, we're kind of back to that kind of that mid-tempo gait, but they do it well, and it's a memorable, catchy song, like pretty much most of them tend to be.
Yeah, no doubt about that. The next track is called My Justice, Your Pain, and it starts with this really interesting drum fill at the beginning, which, again, different ways to start all these tracks. This one has a bit of a 90s alt-rock feel to it.
Oh, my God. Green Day. It reminded me of Green Day.
Am I wrong? Or, obvious...
But it reminded me of, like, 21st Century Breakdown Green Day. Like, even so...
Right.
But yeah, I love that the way it kicks off with her and just her and the drums, really cool. But yeah, there's a Green Day song from 21st Century Breakdown. I don't remember which one it was, but it reminds me a lot of this song. It's very catchy,
and it's blending that alt rock sound, but maintaining their core, their core sound as well. I think it's a very poppy tune, and I don't care. I love it. I think this is. With the exception, of course, of the growls, this is actually one of my favorite songs by the band, just because they went outside their comfort zone, probably for the first time. Great tune, and I highly recommend that people check it out.
Yeah, this is one of my, probably one in my top 3 on this album. Big fan of this one. Hope they play this one live too.
Yeah, I would be, again, pleasantly surprised, but very happy nonetheless. we get to Haunted, which starts with this like piano, almost like a waltz like quality to it. But when the band kicks in, it really does kind of hit you in the face pretty quickly. It packs a punch. I would say this is one of the more underrated tunes on the album, in my opinion. I think that there's a lot here to like, and it almost sway to the beat as you're banging your head, which is kind of a cool thing. What do you think of Haunted?
I think you're right on. It's kind of, it's interesting because it goes from that like poppy, almost punky kind of tune, and then they go right back to like what they do
Their
so
bread and
well.
butter.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a Castlevania-y kind of just a haunting kind of tune, but just again, another really good song. I can't really say anything bad about any of these songs. They're all just really good. If
You mentioned earlier about how does she kind of go in and out of the vocal styles, and how does she pull off both live. I don't know that there's a better example of that than Lullaby. It's the way this goes out. It's very orchestration heavy, but she goes in and out of these vocals, both the growls and the cleans, so seamlessly that I almost want to hear the song live just to hear whether or not she can pull that off. A really, really big pre-chorus followed up by an even bigger bombastic chorus. This is a cool song just because of the way it builds, and it's well placed at the very end of the album.
Yeah, very well said. I stand corrected. This album was more orchestral, like more symphonic than I thought.
Yeah.
I might have been thinking more about the third album, which I think kind of strays a bit from that. But
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty on par, if not, very close to chapter one as far as just the. It might have been just because there are a couple of songs that, like My Justice, Your Pain, that kind of stray. It almost like you're getting that kind of hint of what's to come on the third album with a song like that, and maybe that's why. I don't know why I had that in my head, but yeah, now that I'm kind of re-listening to this a bit, it really is very symphonic in retrospect.
So does that change your score at all, or what are we giving this?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that it's a shade under the debut, but I still give it a very high 8.5.
Okay, so interesting, because I give it an 8.25, and it's my favorite album. But at the end of the day, I think it's a great album, and I very much look forward to hearing this stuff live.
Oddly enough, that means that we have the same average score on the two albums with a 8.375.
No, because mine's at 8.25. So right now I'm averaging an 8.
Right, but I'm saying that we averaged 8.375 on the first album, and we're averaging 8.375 on the second album.
Oh, when you put the between our averages. Yeah, I guess that's right. It's so because I brought it up, and that makes sense, and I can do math for all those listening. But I now I understand what you're saying. Will we average an 8.375 on the last album? I don't know. Let's stay tuned. This album came out earlier this year. I played the hell out of it. I think I liked it more when I first heard it a bunch of times. As I went back to it, I like how they push the envelope with some of the songwriting. As I mentioned, they kind of go in a bit of an electronic vibe here, even more so than the prior disc. I hear lots of Amaranth on these tracks. It's very good, but interestingly enough, I actually think the back half of this disc blows away the first half. And I don't know if that was on purpose or what, but this finishes really strong. But the first half of this album is good. The second half is great. And I'm wondering if you agree with the overall sentiment, or if you think that the first half is just loaded with great tunes.
You know what? I'll save that for towards the end, because as we go through it, it'll kind of. I mean, I just listened to this like an hour ago, but like, as we talk about it, I don't know if I agree or not. So okay. We'll kind of make our way through it, but I definitely do agree that there's a bit less of the orchestra vibe, and I think that was kind of a welcome change for me. Just as a spoiler alert, this is going to be on my year-end list unless 50 well, not 50, but unless like 40 really albums that blow it out of the water come out in the next 6 months.
Same. I think it's a little more commercial sounding. I think that they were trying to almost get the radio play with this one. Not that they were actually going to get on the radio with it, but you understand what I mean. Like they were trying to get on Liquid Metal or something.
Yeah, and I do wonder if I don't know if there's just any sort of thought process creative wise for the, like, is this the third of 3 chapters? Is every album going to be a chapter until chapter 12 retirement? Like is it going to be like Led Zeppelin where they just number everything? Or is this just a trilogy and then we move on from that after this? I don't know. So I don't know if there was a mindset as far as like each album is supposed to represent a certain type of sound or a lyrical theme. Not really sure.
A good question to ask before the restraining order kicks in.
Yeah, so I'll see how many questions I could get in before I get maybe not. Maybe I don't want to say arrested. That might be going a little too far. Who knows? Maybe she'll think I'm charming. I don't know. Anyway, I completely lost my train of thought. So now you say things.
I'll say this. Let's get into the album. Let's kind of get through this one, and then I'll share some final thoughts. The song that kicks this off is called "Eternal Rains," and it's pretty standard fare, I think, for them at this point. It's your mid-paced banger, heavy low end with these angelic vocals over the top. I think it's one of the more memorable, catchy choruses on the album, and just overall a very easy listen. But it's not my favorite song because I've heard it done by them now at this point for 2 albums.
Yeah, I really like this one. Just it really kicks things off, I think, in a very upbeat sort of way, like very energetic. So yeah, good stuff. This is a meaty album. It's got 14 songs on it. So
yeah, it's very dense. But they're all short, so it moves pretty quickly.
It's also the first album where the album art actually shows the rest of the band. Not the first 2 albums they're wearing their I don't know. I don't think it's correct, but they look like the Spy versus Spy masks. I'm sure
exactly.
Like a real name for that, or it's from something, and it's just I don't know. But this one actually shows the other 3 guys' faces. So I was wondering if they were going to show up on stage with the masks on, but I'm guessing based on this album art, they're probably not.
I'm going to guess not, but nothing would surprise me. I think the next track, Upside Down, is a little bit lighter and airier than the prior track, and this one to me has a huge electronic feel. This to me is like Amaranth personified, like this and 1 or 2 other tracks on this album. Great drum fills. It's the kind of chorus that makes you want to jump up and down to the song. I like this a lot, and I like it much better than the first track, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, very Amaranth vibes. Definitely got that electronic kind of vibe to it, but then yet still has like those orchestrations to it as well, like really interesting combo of those two kind of styles.
It was also the first single on the album, which makes a lot of sense, I think. To me, I can totally hear that and why they chose it, because it's just so catchy. And then ultimately what would become the 3rd single is this song called Seth. I don't appreciate this song as much as I probably should, and I can't really pinpoint why. It's a little slower. It kind of reminds me of the first track in many ways, but for some reason this song has just never clicked for me, and it's among my least favorite in their catalog.
I really like this song, so I don't know what your problem is.
Neither do I. I can't. What about it do you like?
I don't know. It's just good. It's just it kind of reminded me a little bit of, I think, like maybe an earlier Within Temptation kind of tune, but I don't know. Again, it's just that kind of mid-tempo, like really marchy, just catchy song that Ad Infinitum does so well. I really like this tune, and this was like you said, another single. But I liked it. It also has a little bit of a tinge of a Amaranth melodically vibe to it.
Yeah, I can hear that. Um, let's move away from this because I think we just disagree. For some reason it just never clicked, and I'm sure they'll play it live, and I'm sure
it
I'll
happens.
grab a beer or
We
something.
don't agree on everything. It's okay.
But do we agree on From the Ashes? This is, by their standards, the epic on the album at a whopping 4 minutes and 41 seconds. And this thing is basically an ode to Thomas Youngblood and his guitar playing with Camelot. I just hear Youngblood riffs through and through on this thing, and I like the pacing on the verses. And I don't even know if this is a word, but is it syncopated? Like, that's the word I want to say when I hear when I hear the verses on this thing. This is a great song sandwiched between two singles, and I would argue the best of the three, even though I think it might have been the last single released.
Yes, definite like Camelot vibes for sure, but with some a little bit of like again a little bit of that electronic kind of vibe that I think was very absent from the first two albums. But yeah, very catchy tune, and definitely makes sense that this was chosen as a single for sure.
But yet they also picked Somewhere Better as a single, and this one I just don't understand as well. A good song. It reminds me of Early Delane, just not quite as good, I guess. It has a bit of an ambient sound to it, which is something different, so I'll give credit for trying something new. But it's a little paint by numbers for me, and it just is a song that not really... I think there's better songs on the album. The one thing I'll say, though, is there's this section of vocals that's almost like sultry in nature. I thought that was kind of cool. But other than that, this one's a little bit of a miss for me.
I like it. Probably not as much as you do, or probably like it more than you do, I should say. Again, though, like you said, like there's definitely a kind of a radio vibe going on here, but that actually kind of works for me. Because I like that kind of commercial kind of vibe to it, and so this track kind of I dig. It's not my favorite, but it's good. Yeah, I like this one.
For my money, the album really picks up now with the Underworld, and for the rest of this album, I just think that now they start really kind of getting into a groove. This is more upbeat. It's more of a power metal tune, and I love the way they use the growls. It almost gives off like a Machine Supremacy vibe to this track. Really, really like modern and electronic sounding. One of my absolute favorites from the disc, and a song that I find myself gravitating towards, in part because it's just unique and different, and they were at least pushing the boundaries on something like this. Noteworthy because it has this very thick guitar tone, which is something they almost like a djenty feel to it. This would be a Song of the Week contender for me.
It's so funny you said that because I got the same vibe. Like it reminded me of Voyager. Like the guitar, that kind of just crunchy like guitar. It comes up again on this album too. But yeah, I wasn't sure if djent was going to be the right word for it. So I'm glad you said it before I did. Because I don't really think I understand what djent even means. But it reminded me of those kind of bands that are often lumped into the djent conversation. But yeah, I thought that was a really cool addition to the whole presentation. And this is again one of the faster tunes, so it just kind of has a real catchy, just fun and infectious quality to it.
Yeah, I well said. I agree with that, and I think that the next track, Ravenous, has a similar feel to it. Not in terms of style. I think it's very different sounding, but it's just very catchy. The vocal lines kind of make you sway to the beat on this one, and the way it opens up, you almost feel like you're on the Serengeti Plains with like this. Wow. Yeah, don't ask me why, but that's where I put myself with this one. Almost like tribal drumming in spots. To me, this has a strong Within Temptation feel to it.
Yeah, definitely agree there. A solid tune. Not sure it's one of my favorites on the album, but again, like it's 3 albums and none of them. There's not one bad song on all 3 albums. So if you're waiting for us to pan something, you're gonna have to keep waiting for another. Maybe their 4th album will have something shitty on
it. Under the Burning Skies, the next track is like a real ballad, and it's something that they've kind of touched upon on the other albums, but I think here you get it in full effect. What do you think of it?
Like a real true Camelot ballad to me, like just very, very symphonic. But you would think that they would have done more of these kind of songs up until this point, because Melissa's voice is so beautiful that like it lends really well to this kind of song. But very, very emotional, very. I think it's done really well, and the way that the second half really picks up with the orchestrations, just really, really solid tunes. Arguably my favorite of their mellower songs.
I agree. I just feel like the payoff at the end should have been a little bit bigger and more grandiose. It's almost like what could have been. It's a great song, but I feel like it could have been just a touch better, as if I know how to write a song. But like towards the end, I feel like they could have done just a little bit more with it. But still an enjoyable ballad, and something I hope that they kind of delve into a little bit more going forward.
Well put, well put.
Now, let's talk about Architect of Paradise, because this is a song I don't think I ever hear anyone mention. I didn't see it really talked about in many of the reviews that I read at the time that the album came out, but this is a really good song and a favorite of mine from the album. I think the chorus really kind of opens this up, but the entire song is driven by that thick low end sound. But I think it's really well done, and I think for an album where the orchestration is lacking a little bit compared to the first two, it pops on this one, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, again, you're taking. I wouldn't say you're taking the words right out of my mouth, because I don't have the words. So you're taking the words out of my brain as I struggle to formulate English sentences describing this music. But yes, I like this one too.
Well, I'm gonna give you the floor with The Serpent's Downfall, because this is another one that kind of gives off ballady vibes to it, and also has a bit of an electronic feel, but it's neither one of those things, I guess, really. Talk to me about this track and what you think of it.
It, yeah, like you said, it starts out. I don't know if I'd call it ballady. It's just very, very chill, and then it definitely picks up about a minute to a minute and a half into it, and goes back to that kind of mid-tempo marching kind of vibe that the band does so well. Again, this is another track that kind of reminds me of Delane in certain ways, but again, really solid, and it's right that wheelhouse that Ad Infinitum does so well. That just to me, it's difficult to write catchy mid-tempo songs that have a marching cadence, and they're so good at doing that, at having like these mid-tempo hooks that just get stuck in your brain.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well said. This is a song that has consistently gotten in my head from the first time I heard it, and it was no different this week. The one caveat being, I don't love the chorus. I think that the rest of the song is great. I think the chorus is kind of mediocre, but it's so catchy that it doesn't matter. And by that, I mean the whole song. Really, really good song. I like it a lot. And then we get into New Dawn, which is another song that's not only well placed on the album, but a radio-friendly tune in many ways, just with a heavier low end. This has a serious Taylor Swift vibe to me. And it's funny because we've talked about her now multiple times in the last month. I hear Taylor Swift on this thing, but at the same time, I want to roll down the windows. I want to blast this song, and I don't care who's listening. You had picked the second song in their discography as your song of the week. I'm picking the second to last song on this album as my song of the week, not including the bonus tracks. New Dawn is my song of the week, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. Play the song, and I want to get your thoughts.
I'm sorry that they had to listen to us talk for that long in between tracks, but here it is.
Another sunrise, another day, another miracle, or so they say. Under the moonlight, pledging my tears to build a paradise. Will you believe in me? I know the courage I've been waiting for. Oh,
All right, talk to me about New Dawn. What are your thoughts?
I loved what you had to say about it. It's arguably their most just. There's something just so like life affirming about it. It just feels like a really upbeat and positive kind of song. I really like it too, and I don't judge you in the least bit for choosing it for your song of the week. I think it's interesting that we chose the second track and the second to last track as our favorites. Thus, like I said before, cramming in about an hour of us yammering on about this band in between. But what it is, what it is. Good tune, and I think well placed towards the end of the album as well.
Yeah, I agree. And then that brings us to Legends, which is really the last track before two instrumental bonus tracks that are kind of smashed on at the end of this thing. This is interesting because it starts with this spoken word intro, which is not something they really have employed throughout their entire career. And it's an interesting last track. It almost feels like a bonus track itself. It's a little bit different than the rest of the album, but at the same time, I think it's very enjoyable. A great guitar solo with just like a pleasant beat to it. Arguably could have opened the album with this, perhaps. But at the same time, it's powerful and diverse enough that it makes for a good ending track. I like it a lot.
Yeah, really solid tune. Chorus, again, giving me some of those Delane vibes. Which, by the way, I love Delane. So when I say that, that's a high compliment. And I stand corrected, too. I said earlier there were 14 tracks. There's really 12 tracks. And like you said, there's two instrumental bonus tracks. I accidentally started listening to one and was kind of like, it took me a second. I wasn't paying attention. I'm like, well, there's nobody singing. What the hell is going on? So
now you know why. But for those keeping track at home, it's Upside Down for the second track, and then Somewhere Better, two of the singles that they released as instrumental tracks. So good stuff, and an album that I'm sure we'll be talking about in less detail in our top 50 episode at the end of the year. But tell me, where does this rank for you in terms of the pantheon of the three albums?
I put it right in between 1 and 2 at 8.75. I like it a smidge better than Chapter 2, and I like it a smidge less than Chapter 1. And I was like all over the board all week, but I feel pretty confident. I've been listening to some of these tracks as we've been talking, and it's kind of just I think solidified my confidence in my own scores. But a little peek behind the curtain. We were supposed to record this episode a day earlier, but I just felt like I was like laying on the couch thinking about like how I wanted to score these albums, and I just drew a complete blank. I didn't know like what I felt like one versus the other, and so I really wanted to listen to all three albums again, particularly with headphones, and just really ingest the song. So I feel pretty good about it, I have a feeling that Ad Infinitum has been in the top 10. My top 10, the first two albums they've released. I have a pretty good feeling this one might make my top 10 this year. But
with a score like that, I'd be shocked if it didn't. That's a high score to be outside the top 10.
Yeah, we'll see. I've listened to a handful of pretty good albums this year that I would put in this kind of general area, but it's becoming a pattern. I think that whenever they release an album, it's one of my favorites of the year.
Yeah, I well said. It's not quite that high for me, although I obviously did enjoy it, and it's on my list as well. It's a 7.75 for me. I think it's a really good release. I have it kind of similar with that first album, just because I think there's a couple of songs that I didn't care for, so I can't rate it that much higher. And I think the highs on that second disc or that second album are a little bit higher for me, but by and large, three very good releases and a band that I am very much looking forward to seeing and sponsoring at Prog Power.
100% right there with you. I was excited to see them live before we did this. I'm even more excited now. And I feel like I've completely jogged my memory on the first two albums and given the third album a handful more listens than I may have otherwise. So I will be pretty much ready for whatever they're going to throw at us in September. I'm pumped.
Well, we are almost there. And speaking of bands that we're going to be seeing in September, the Halo Effect is back in the studio. They're mixing their second album, which is due out. I don't know. It's going to come out soon, I would imagine, because they seem to come out pretty fast. But they're in the studio. They're saying it sounds great. I have no doubt. And I bring this up not only because they're recording a new album, not only because they're playing Prog Power, but they are, let's just say, on the calendar for this July and at the Metal Exchange. Do you want to go through and kind of give a peek behind the curtain as to what people can expect over the next month? Because, as I said, due to the sheer volume of material, we needed to kind of map this out at least for the next few weeks.
Yeah, and plus, if the listeners want to kind of prep themselves, they're probably going to want to have a little bit of extra time. But July is going to be kind of our little month of prep for day 2 of Prog Power, which is promoted by Milton Mendonça. He's been a co-promoter at Prog Power for years now, and so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about we're pretty much going to cover every album released by the third, fourth, and fifth band that's playing on the day 1 Thursday night, the day 2 Thursday night lineup, starting next week with the band that I'm most excited to see at Prog Power above all else. And there's a lot I'm excited about, but this one is number 1 for me, and that's Beast in Black doing a headline set. We're going to talk about all 3 of their albums, Berserker, From Hell With Love, and Dark Connection. If you thought I was excited to talk about Ad Infinitum, this is even more exciting for me because I absolutely adore this band and the band that they kind of came from, that they kind of splintered off from, which is Battle Beast, who are also going to be playing at Prog Power right before Ad Infinitum on Friday at day 3. So that's going to be next week. The following week, we'll be talking about we're going to do a career retrospective on the Halo Effect.
And because that second album will not be out, it'll be a one album. It'll be a ground ball, but it'll be a good listen because I like that album a lot, and I think that there's a lot for you to gravitate there towards as well.
Yeah, they're going to be third on the bill on day 2, and I listened to the album a couple of times last year, but not as many times as I probably should have. So this is kind of an excuse for me to kind of give it another listen and try to get a little bit more excited about their set. We'll follow that up with an exclusive interview with Milton, the promoter. We'll talk about how he came up with this lineup, who he's looking forward to. Maybe ask some questions about some of his, some of the previous things that he's booked. But Milton is a friend, a patron to the podcast, and again, the promoter for day 2 of Prog Power. So we're looking forward to having a chat with him. And why don't you spill the beans on the final episode of the month?
The final episode of the month, and I credit you for this because I have to admit this was your idea. It's going to be a career retrospective on Vola, which is going to be fascinating because it's a band that I really enjoy, although I do have some strong thoughts on some of their material. But it's a band that you don't know that much by, so that's going to be a little bit of work for you to kind of dig deep into especially some of their older material, which I know you haven't heard. I mean, I haven't heard it all, so it's going to be very interesting, but I look forward to it because it kind of rounds out that Thursday night lineup, and it puts a little prog on the table, which we haven't done in a little bit of time now.
Well, I made a promise to our mutual friend Tyler, and that I said I will make my damnedest effort to get into this band Vola because he's a big fan. In return, he promised he would do his damnedest to get into Beast in Black, and considering that they're the 2 top bands on day 2, I thought it would make sense to talk about both in full, and it also is not too terribly labor intensive because both bands only have 3 full-length albums. Vola has a couple of EPs and a couple of extra tracks, but I think all told they have about the same number of individual unique songs. So, and I just want to be, I think Vola might turn into that band that I end up getting really excited about. So I wanted to make sure I gave them the necessary time. So that's July. And then when we come back in August, we'll have a request, but we'll save that, towards the end of the month to reveal, what that one's going to be. The patrons know they got the spoiler alert on the video chat this week, but, we'll hold that one close to the cards since it's a month away. But yeah, a lot to look forward to. And
sometimes I feel like we're a little behind the eight ball here, but at the same time, I think that we're going to catch up well. So it'll be a very interesting month here at the Metal Exchange.
Yeah, agreed. I just think it's kind of interesting because in years past, I know we've talked about really prepping hard for Prog Power, and there was a time where I would listen to every single band as much as I possibly could, just try my hardest to know everything. And at this point, it's I just don't have that kind of time. The podcast is kind of part of a reason for that, but it also makes for a good excuse to get prepped on bands that I'm truly interested in getting excited about. And I have a feeling that there might be more Prog Power related stuff come August. I don't know if we'll spend the entire month doing Prog Power bands, but I'm sure at least one will pop up.
Well, I think that's a good way to end it. We've gone long with this one. We're going to come back next week with some Beast in Black. I am truly, truly excited. I'm going to lose my mind when I see that band because I've actually got some really strong thoughts on them when it comes to the first and second albums specifically. But we'll leave it there. Give us a like and a follow if you like what you hear. Consider joining the Patreon. We appreciate all those who support the show, and we will come back next week and discuss one of the fastest rising bands in the genre, Beast in Black. Enjoy the week, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
I am very excited for next week, but I also really enjoyed this talk, so thanks again to Amy for the request, and we'll see you next week. Take care, my friend.
Take care.